Hi, I'm Ellie, and I thought I'd make some videos on how to program in C++. I've been programming in it for quite some time now. Started programming when I was 9, and I think I picked up C++ around when I was 12 or so. So these videos are going to be done on Windows, and I'll be using Microsoft Visual Studio for that, the Community Edition. I highly recommend using it. It's very good program. It's free as long as you are using it for nonprofit or personal use. I believe you can also use it as long as you're not making very much money, but don't quote me on that. So if you're on Linux or Macintosh, a lot of what I'll be doing should be relatively the same. Some of it might be Windows specific, and I'll try and be good about pointing that out beforehand. So when you get Visual Studio installed, you should be presented with a screen that looks a lot like this. It might be kind of a purplish white, but you can change the theme easily to be dark like this if you want to. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a project. And we can do that by either going up to the File menu, New Project, or we can come over here on the Start page and just click New Project. Once you do, you're either going to end up in a window that looks like this, or one that looks like this. Either way, you should be able to find Win32 console application, which is what we're going to be creating. And down here, you can choose the name of it as well as the name for the solution. You can name that whatever you want. It does not matter. I'm just going to keep the default for now. And in the wizard here, we're going to make sure to do empty project because I want to walk you guys through from the very beginning of how to create a project. So we're going to click Finish. And once it's done creating the project, it'll put us on a blank page. You should see the Solution Explorer either on the left or on the right. I have mine on the left. If you do not see it, you can go up to View and click Solution Explorer, and that'll bring it up. So first you have your solution. This can contain multiple projects. We will probably not get into that in these videos. And inside of that, you have your project. And inside of that, you'll have your files. So in order to start making a C++ program, we have to add a source file. And if we right-click our project, we can do Add New Item. And in here, we're going to do C++ file. We want it to end in .cpp. Again, you can name it whatever you want. A lot of people will either name it whatever the project is named or something like main.cpp because you can have multiple source files inside of a project. And very quickly does that happen in a project. And they get out of hand very quickly too, so it's good to split it up into multiple files. I'm just going to call it main. So, and then click Add, and we'll end up in a text editor. You can see I have 1 over here. That's a line number. So if I hit Enter, we have multiple lines, and it's very nice to have. I highly recommend enabling that, which you can do just by going up to Tools, Options, and then scrolling down until you see Text Editor, and then clicking on C, and there'll be a line numbers checkbox. Just go ahead and make sure that's checked and hit OK. So C++ is a compiled language, and that's as opposed to an interpreted language. An interpreted language is a programming language where you have a program that will read your code, interpret it, and turn that code into machine code as it's running. So if it says something like printing text to the screen, it will turn that into the machine code for doing that and then send that to your CPU. Whereas a compiled program, the process of compiling it does all that interpretation at compile time. And so the program you get in the end is just machine code. And the nice thing about that is not only does it perform better, but people can't look at your source code. There's some detriments to that as well. It's not as portable. With an interpreted language, you can run the same program on Linux, Macintosh, and Windows usually just fine. Take any Java program as an example. However, something that is not portable is what's referred to as a native application. That's a compiled program. And so I can't take the program I make here and run it on Linux and not have a problem. I would have to run that in some sort of emulation process in order for that to work. Or I can't take a Macintosh program and run it on Windows. So compiled languages are very, very nice in a lot of ways, but they have their detriments. So C++ is a compiled language. And during the compilation, it needs to know where our code begins. And in order to make that easy for ourselves, we kind of have a standard for that. You can modify that, of course, but the standard for that is that it will always look for a function called main. And a function is kind of a group of code that you can just execute whenever you want just by referencing that function. So you can think of, like in math, you have the function square root. That's a function. You're never referencing the math behind square root. You never have to retype that, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, which is nice. So in order to make our function, we're going to type out int main, then int argc, char asterisk, argv, square brace, bracket, I guess I should say. And then we're going to do curly brace and hit enter. So this is a function. So you have the name of the function, which is main, the data type to the left of that, of whatever the function is. So we know that main returns an integer. This is the return type. And then you have your parentheses. And anything inside the parentheses is an argument. So, and you have two arguments because they're comma delimited. So you have your first argument, comma, then your second argument. And with anything in C++, whenever you're declaring something, you always, generally speaking, have the data type to the left of it. So the name of the first argument is argc, and the data type of that is integer or int. And then over here we have argv, and to the left of that we have char asterisk. And then to the right of that we have these square braces, brackets. And we'll get into what all of this means later, but that is the arguments for our main function right now. And with C++, you can actually get away with not having these on your main function, and the compiler will put those in for you. So by not including them, it looks nicer if you want to do it that way, to have no arguments on main, but it will put those in for you. And so you're not saving any space in the compiled version, but it definitely looks nicer. And this is, I'm just putting these in for clarity's sake right now. So after that, our function needs to return something. Now an integer is a number. It's a flat number, so it can't have a decimal point. And the general thing of functions or programs always have a return value, and that return value is usually the number of errors that happened. And so if we want a successful return, we say, hey, 0. We're returning 0 errors. 0 errors happened. So we need to return 0. And in C++, every statement that does anything that is not just a declaration like the rest of our code here has to end in a semicolon, which is that guy. And you can have multiple statements on a single line, and it will just execute one after another. C++, unlike, say, Python, does not have any rules about spaces or tabs or anything. As long as everything is in the order that it should be and is properly formatted, spaces don't matter. So just with this data type up here, I can actually have a space in between that asterisk. I can have the asterisk over by the name of the variable. It all comes down to personal preference. And the same thing with these curly braces. I can have the curly brace up here, or I can have it down here, which is what I personally prefer. By the way, these curly braces signify that anything inside of them belongs to whatever these curly braces are connected to. So you could say that everything inside these curly braces, in this instance, belongs to main. And that way, when this function is called, it will execute everything inside these curly braces. So this is the most basic C++ program you can have. And in order to compile this, we can go up to build and hit build solution or build project. That's what this is. Since we only have one project, I'm just going to be doing build solution, and I'll be using F7 for that. So if I hit F7 right here, our output window will pop up. And this is where any errors that happen will be displayed. So if I remove this semicolon here and build it, you'll see one failed. It is missing the semicolon. So if I add in the semicolon and build it, you'll see one succeeded. So there's no errors here. Now this is kind of a boring program right now. So we're going to make it output some text. And the most common thing for our first program to output is hello world. It's kind of cheesy, but it does the job. So in order to output anything to the screen, we need to include a file. We can't input or output right now without including some pre-made functions for us. And so we're going to use a preprocessor statement for that. And I'll explain what a preprocessor statement is later. Just know that for now, we are including a file in order to do to output text. So include IO stream, and that's input output stream. Now with that included, I can come down into our main function and type std : cout, that's console out, less than hello world, end our quote, and then less than std : end L, and then a semicolon to end the statement. Now if I compile this, it will output our text. So if I go to debug, start debugging, that's F5 by the way, or you can go up here and do local Windows debugger. So if I hit F5 right now, it'll compile it and then run it. Now, right now, the window will not stay open. You can see it just starts and then exits. In order to see our text, we can just right click and open containing folder, go up one, go to debug, and there's our exe. So we can go up here and open command prompt, type in the name of our program, and we can see it outputs hello world and then exits. So what's actually going on right here is this endl will put on a new line. And for those tech savvy among you, on Windows, this will do /r/n. On Linux, this will do /n. And on Macintosh, if I'm not mistaken, it will do /r, but it might just do /n. I'm not sure. So Microsoft's implementation of it is specific to the OS. However, the code standard is universal. So if I compile this on Linux, it will perform the same. if I compile this on Macintosh, it will perform the same, even though the underlying code it generates is slightly different. So this means that no matter what operating system I compile on this, I can expect the same result in the end, which is very, very handy. So this outputs a new line, and this less than will append the endl to the end of our text here. And then we have another less than right here, and so this is appending our hello world new line into the C output stream. And so you can think of them like rivers. You know, we're just funneling one thing into another and then into another. And it ends up being at the end of our output, which is the console. So we end up with hello world and then a new line right here. And then it exits, which is return 0. So that's nice, but what if we want to keep the window open so we don't need to go in and open a command prompt every time? We need to do another one, which is std cin dot ignore. And then that's 2 parentheses because it's a function, and semicolon. Now if I run this, it will stay open. And it will stay open for as long as I do not hit a key. As soon as I hit a key, it will close. And because I'm doing ignore instead of, say, get, it will ignore whatever I throw in there. So it will accept a single input and throw it away. It'll ignore it. And so this way our window stays open. But this is kind of ugly. We can clean this up a little bit by getting rid of our std : So in order to do that, I'm going to come up here to the top of the file and do using namespace std. And what that does is you can think of a namespace like a folder. And the one we're using is called std. And in order to reference a function inside of a namespace without using this right here, we need to have the name of the namespace and then 2 colons. So this is std : then the name of our function or object. So by adding using namespace std, it allows us to completely get rid of that, and it will still look inside of std to see if that function exists within it. So I can just come in here and get rid of these, and there's no errors. However, if I commented this out right now, you'll see all these red lines appear. It doesn't know where to find those. Those don't exist to our IDE. But if I have that uncommented, it works fine, and I can still compile it and run it. And we get hello world, and it stays open. So this is your most basic C++ program. It's your, well, not your most basic, since we have something that holds the window open. So in another video, we'll be covering data types and some other stuff. But for now, that's your basic hello world. I suggest playing around with it and just have fun with it. I'll talk to you guys later. Have fun.